Hi, well, it's Dr. Fox, and in this video, I want to talk about how you see yourself in BPD. And you may be one of those individuals that has a tendency to engage in self-shaming. And self-shaming can sometimes lead to body shaming or some identity disturbance. And identity disturbance, unstable self-image, is really common for individuals with BPD or BPD traits. And what drives a lot of these things can be what's called early maladaptive schemas. Now, we're going to talk more about early maladaptive schemas, and I'm going to give you a list of a whole bunch of them. And I want you to think about it. See if this is part of what's related to how you feel about yourself, but also how you treat yourself. Things that you say to yourself, that engaging in that self-shaming. And what that does is when you engage in that sense of self-shaming, believe it or not, a lot of folks that are dealing with BPD, low self-esteem, poor self-concept, they engage in self-shaming because they're fulfilling an internalized pattern that they learned early in life. And out of these early experiences, you've developed what are called early maladaptive schemas. Now, schemas are ways we see the world and the way we interpret the world. Maladaptive schemas are negative. They're built on negative experiences and negative information. Early is the early in life part. And interestingly, human beings, we are really quick to develop this blueprint to give us a sense of understanding as to how the world works, how it functions, how people are going to treat us, so on and so forth. And as we get older, and if we're along a, let's say, pathological trajectory, a disorder-based trajectory, which could be BPD, it could be because of families, could be because of invalidating environments, which I'll do a whole video on invalidating environments and how that can contribute to the development of BPD. But here we're talking about early maladaptive schemas and self-shaming, which can also factor into body shaming as well. And we have to look at that. Okay, so here is this tendency to self-shame. Where does that come from? Early maladaptive schemas. Could that come from invalidating environments? Absolutely. Could it be what mom, dad, brother, sister, cousin told you? Were you neglected? Did you have a sense of abandonment? And these early blueprints that they become solidified over time. And in adulthood, it can get really, really hard to challenge and change them. Now, I want you to hear what I said, is that really hard doesn't mean impossible. They used to believe that Everest was impossible to climb. Somebody did it, and then other people did it too. It's not easy, but somebody did it. Now, before we get into breaking this down and we're talking about BPD and self-shaming, I want to tell you something that somebody told me today, somebody that I admire very much. I respect him very much. And he told me, do you know what the difference between a cow and a buffalo is? And I was like, I don't know. I thought it was like going to be a joke, And what he said was, he said, if a storm's coming, hard rain is coming, cows will run and run and run and run to get ahead of it. And as they're running, they'll become dehydrated. Some will trip and fall. Some will get lost. Some will even pass away, die in the process. And then he said, but you know what buffaloes do? Buffaloes charge the hard rain. And when you charge the hard rain, it lasts for a shorter period of time. And he said, I'm a buffalo. Not me, him, he himself is a buffalo. I'd like to think I'm a buffalo, right? But what are you? BPD is going to tell you that you're a cow. No. Be a buffalo. You're going to charge into that hard rain and recognizing, looking at early maladaptive schemas, pushing back from falling into those old patterns of self-shaming, body shaming, and we're going to build a sense of identity. That's what this channel and these videos are all about, building that sense of identity, clearing that disturbance, that identity disturbance, that unstable self-image, and building that sense of self, because that's what this is all about. Now, the research says that those with BPD report higher levels of early maladaptive schemas, which we're going to go over in a minute, characterological, behavioral, and body shame, and they were more prone to react with anxiety and anger than individuals that did not have BPD. Now, early maladaptive schema domains had specific associations with chronic shame and reaction types to social put-downs. That means that when they're put down publicly or by an identified other, could be a partner, could be a coworker, could be a boss, could be anybody, that there's this greater sense of anxiety, shame, this negative reaction that is internal, and it starts to feed on itself, feed on itself, feed on itself, feed on itself, and it grows and grows. It's like a balloon, right? You keep blowing that air into it, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's how it feels inside. And those maladaptive schemas, those early maladaptive schemas, what they do is they are the hot air. That's what encourages you to blow into that balloon. That's what encourages that negative balloon to grow and get bigger, and it becomes a more prominent fixture in your life. We're going to try to take some of that hot air out. Also, I want to talk about identity disturbance because I mentioned that earlier. Now, identity disturbance are often associated with characterological, behavioral, and body shame. Now, a lot of individuals with BPD have body shaming. It is connected to the sense of self-shaming, absolutely, and connected to those early maladaptive schemas. Because I think that if we look at shaming overall, particularly self-shaming, body shaming, that if we look at underneath, we'll see those early maladaptive schemas. We'll be able to pull it apart so you know what to challenge and push back on. Now, a lot of folks that follow my channel and write me, and they ask me a lot of questions about relationships or loved ones or things of that nature. And interestingly, the research shows that stormy relationships, really rocky, turbulent, very sort of unstable, tumultuous relationships, there's all this anxiety and anger and rage and just this intensity, that stormy relationships were associated with bodily shame, which kind of makes sense, right? That when you don't feel good about yourself, that you become maybe more sensitive, more critical, not only with yourself, but what you think your partner or that important other thinks about you. Now, your early maladaptive schemas add into that because they can feed into what I call a BPD lens, but even folks without borderline personality disorder have early maladaptive schemas. We're just putting it in the lens of BPD. And that BPD lens, which I talk about in my workbook, and that it's that distorted view of self, other, and your world, that can come out of those early maladaptive schemas. And body shaming is one of those things that helps to keep your sense of self, keep your BPD intact and perpetuated. And we don't want to perpetuate it. We want to push back on it. So much so that maybe we just push it out of the plane, right? You're on a plane, you're flying somewhere great, and your BPD keeps getting in the way. Open the hatch, you're going to push it right out. It might have a parachute or not. That's not our problem, because we're going to get it out of your life. That's what this channel is all about. Lessening that influence so you have more control over it. Now, last, chronic shame and anxious and angry reactions to social put-downs are prominent in individuals with BPD, and they've been found to be associated with specific early maladaptive schemas and with symptoms of identity disturbance and stormy relationships. And that makes total sense, because that sense of shame, that sense of anxiety, and the reaction to feeling put down can build in you so fast, right? It becomes often automatic. And now you've got to defend yourself, right? You're like, wait, did you just put me down? You did put me down. And that we call it family in the head. We get that from Lorna Smith Benjamin. She's a brilliant psychologist who came up with that term. And it's this chorus in your head that's telling you, yeah, he or she, yeah. They're making fun of you. They're ragging on you. They're making you feel small. They're picking on you, right? You need to get them. And there's this little tiny part, because it doesn't have a lot of volume. It's a little tiny part. And that little tiny part is saying, I don't know. What if they're not? But the other, that family in the head, is so loud. It drowns that out. And you hear it and you react on it. And you're just boom. Those early maladaptive schemas, they feed that. They feed that BPD. They feed that internalized pattern of maladaptive beliefs, behaviors, and patterns, right, that we talk about. So what I want to do now is we're going to get into early maladaptive schemas. Now, there are therapists who focus specifically on schema therapy, and schema therapy is an efficacious treatment for BPD. So just so you know. All right, let's get into identifying those early maladaptive schemas. All right, schema number one. And if you're along that BPD spectrum, you're going to kind of understand this. You're going to feel like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Is abandonment and instability. And this is that perceived instability or unreliability of those available for support and connection. And that makes total sense, because that is even one of those classic core content components that I talk about in many of my videos and many of my books and things like that, is core content and surface content. Surface content are all those maladaptive beliefs, behaviors, and patterns, such as body shaming, self-shaming, anxiety, right? Is being perhaps overly sensitive or highly sensitive to people's statements and the things that they do or you feel don't do. That's all surface content. Core content is one of those components is abandonment and instability. It's that abandonment. It's that fear of abandonment. And in my treatment, what I do with a lot of my clients is we try to touch on and understand that core content, but also recognize when it gets activated. And then we implant or put in place a adaptive strategy over the maladaptive strategies. And that's just the first early maladaptive schema, which is abandonment. Let's go on to the second. Now, the second is mistrust and abuse. Now, in this one, the expectation that others will hurt, abuse, humiliate, cheat, lie, manipulate, or take advantage of the individual. Now, what this did, this early maladaptive schema, so that's how you see others. That's how you see the world. And so there's a lot of mistrust. Perhaps you've experienced abuse, which is where that mistrust comes from. But you use that lens that feeds that BPD lens, that feeds that BPD, feeds that self-shaming. You could even internalize it to a pattern where perhaps you say to yourself, I do deserve that because I don't trust you, but I shouldn't be with someone who I respect and trust because I don't have that sense of self-value. And that creates how you see yourself, your world, and the situations that you get in, as well as others. Let's go on to the next one. Emotional deprivation. Now, this is the expectation that your desire for a normal degree of emotional support will not be adequately met by others. Now, there's three types. We've got nurturance, empathy, and protection. And this emotional deprivation is that you feel it's almost like being really dehydrated. You're in the desert and you're just thirsty and you can't get it and you just can't get what you need and you're starving and your throat is dry and it's nothing but desert and dust. That's how it feels on an emotional level, is that you feel that others are not going to emotionally support you, which is then attached to your dreams, which can then attach to how you feel your sense of value, which could then encourage a sense of self-shaming, body shaming, and certainly factors into that sense of unstable self-image. Because if you have an emotional deprivation, emotions are a huge part of being a human being. You may not always like them, but they're there. And even not having emotions is still an emotion if you look at it through that lens, right? So emotional deprivation is that, and there's not just one early maladaptive schema. Let me be sure that I tell you that you can have several. And most of the people that I do consultations with, most of the people that are my clients have multiple early maladaptive schemas. But what we do is we attach it to that core content so we can identify where it came from and change from a maladaptive reaction or point of view or perspective to an adaptive one. So let's go on to another early maladaptive schema. And this one falls right into what we're talking about, defectiveness and shame. Now, this is where you have a feeling that you're defective, you're bad, you're unwanted, you feel inferior or invalid in important areas, or you would be unlovable to significant others if they knew about your defectiveness, if they knew about your brokenness. And I think brokenness is something that a lot of individuals with BPD struggle with. It's the sense that I'm not who I should be. I'm a broken apart human being, that I don't fit in the world. But I want you to remember, if you have a sense of brokenness and you feel this sense of defectiveness, which is feeding that sense of shame, that even broken crayons still color. And I think that is an amazing quote. And I love that because it is so true. Let's go on to another early maladaptive schema. Social isolation and alienation. Now, this is a feeling that you are isolated from the rest of the world. You're different from other people and you're not part of a group or community. This is that sense of being isolated, alienated, different than everybody else. And a lot of my clients with BPD often say, yeah, I don't fit in. I know I don't fit in, that they don't really embrace their sense of uniqueness. But I think you should. I think that we're all unique in some level, in some way, right? None of us are cookie cutters, even identical twins. They may look the same, but as they develop, they may have similar interests, but there are specific things or differences that make them unique. They don't live the exact same life as the other twin. And it's true for those with BPD or whatever issue you may be contending with, that it's about embracing that sense of uniqueness. And, for my clients that have BPD, they're very unique in how they see the world and how they interact with it. I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that a lot of them are very entrepreneurial. A lot of them are very creative in how they approach the world and see the world and interact with it. So let's go on to the next one. Dependence and incompetence. This is the belief that you're unable to handle your everyday responsibilities in a competent manner without considerable help and immense help from others. And what this can be is that you embrace a sense of helplessness. You have this sense of incompetence, that you're not able to do it. Doesn't that sound a little bit like a belief system that would support self-shaming? Absolutely it would. Because you're telling yourself that you can't do it, such and such has to do it because you're too stupid. You're incompetent. You're unable to do A, B, and C. It's this self-shaming and self-ridicule that makes you feel less than. And you're not. That's why we got to challenge these early maladaptive schemas. You may have internalized that from that early invalidating environment. But as an adult, we can control the environment that we're in. We can control the things that we do, and we can control, to the best of our ability, the people that are in our life by the choices that we make. And that's tough. But if you feel a sense of dependence and incompetence, it's hard to make those choices because you feel trapped within those relationships as though there is nothing else out there. And remember how I said these are connected, which can then make you feel like you have a sense of social isolation and alienation. So why would you leave this person? Because then if you leave that person, you'll be alone forever. And if you're alone forever, then you don't really exist. And then if you don't exist and the wind blows, you're going to blow away and then you'll be invisible and you'll be gone forever. And that is a common fear that a lot of folks with BPD experience and believe. So the next one is enmeshment and an undeveloped self. Now, this is this excessive emotional involvement and closeness with you and a significant other. This can be parents, but it can also be a loved one, a favorite person, whoever that may be. And that excessive emotional involvement is at the expense of this full individuation or normal development. So because of that excessive attachment and enmeshment, you overconnected. So you didn't really build a sense of autonomy. And without that sense of autonomy, it's hard to make choices on your own. It's hard to see yourself as an individual who can make choices for themselves and do what they need to do. But in the world that we live in, a lot of times we're required to do that. But if you hold this particular maladaptive schema, it's no wonder that you would self-shame, that you would tell yourself what you can't do, that you're a loser because you can't do A, B, and C, that nobody will love you because you can't do C, D, and E, whatever it may be. And that wasn't supposed to rhyme, but it did. But you get what I'm saying. That it's about how we see ourselves, but we have to have a sense of individuation. We have to have a sense of independence where we're making our own choice, particularly as it relates to our own mental health. Now we're going to talk about one more, and this is the unrelenting standards and hypercriticalness. I see this in a lot of my clients. This is that underlying belief that you must strive to meet high internalized standards of behavior and performance to avoid criticism. But the problem with that is that you don't really operationally clearly define what those standards are. So you're trying to reach a standard that isn't well defined, so you wouldn't know if you got there. And then when I say that to a client, a lot of times they're like, well, I'll know when I get there. It's like trying to drive from wherever you are to Disney World. And you're going to drive to Disney World, but you're not allowed a map. And you're just going to go. But when someone says, well, don't you need a map? How are you going to know? Like, I'll just know when I get there. The odds are pretty good. Either you're never going to get there, or it's going to take you an exceptionally long time in order to get there, and you're going to hit a lot of pitfalls. You may run out of gas. You may have all kinds of problems along the way because we have to identify where we're going just with those unrelenting standards. And those unrelenting standards, because they're ill-defined, that you engage in that hypercriticalness, which could be a form of self-shaming, body shaming, and it factors in to that unstable self-image. And what we need to do is you need to recognize that hypercriticalness. You need to recognize that tendency that you have this false sense of perfectionism, that you have rigid rules about how things are supposed to go, and a preoccupation with time and efficiency. And that time and efficiency can be critical because a lot of my clients will say, well, I'm not getting better fast enough. I'm not reaching this goal. And you ask them, well, what's that goal? To be better. Well, what does better look like? Well, I don't know, just better, feel better. What would feel better feel like? I don't know. And if that sounds like a frustrating conversation, it often is for many of my clients. And it's often hard as a therapist to hear that because it's like, this is part of what we're doing. What we're working on is working to identify those things. And the early maladaptive schemas, man, they get in our way. That's part of it. They block our progress. I understand that. And that's why we work together against it. It is that BPD. My clients and I work together against it, not my client and it, BPD, working against me. Because in those sessions, it's really tough. It's really tough. It's like, one person don't know, karate or any kind of fighting style or anything, fighting two dudes. And it's twice as hard to fight two dudes than it is to fight one dude. So why would I engage in a therapy session where instead of 2-on-1, right, which is me and the client, fighting it, BPD, now instead we're dealing with the client and it, BPD, against me? Well, I'm going to probably get my butt kicked. And I don't want to be in a session where I get my butt kicked. So what we do is we bring it to immediacy. We bring it to what is going on in the session and that it feels tense. It feels like there's this level of resistance or separation between my client and I. And we can bring it up because you know what? Early maladaptive schemas and BPD do not like to be in the light. They prefer to hide in the dark where they can fester and grow and poison. And that's not what we're about. We're about shining a light on it so that you can do it differently. You can learn your early maladaptive schemas and you can overcome them and make those choices to stop self-shaming, stop bodily shaming, learn more about yourself and develop a stable sense of self. So I hope you found this helpful. Please like, share, and subscribe and comment too. And I'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.